Okay, so you want to make money owning Roman gladiators. You are standing in Campania in the middle of the 1st century, within reach of wealthy towns, crowded amphitheaters, and the largest market for violent entertainment in the Mediterranean. In front of you is an enslaved man being offered for sale. He has no arena record, no specialized training, and no famous name scratched onto tavern walls. He is simply strong, young enough to train, and unlucky enough to be treated as property. For a plausible recruit of this kind, you might expect to pay several hundred denarii, perhaps somewhere around 500 to 1,000. That is not a universal Roman price. It is a working range for an adult male slave in prosperous early imperial Italy where age, health, origin, skills, and the conditions of sale could move the price sharply. Even the lower end represents years of ordinary wages. And buying him is not the business. Buying him only gives you something that consumes food and requires guarding. Your profit begins only if you can transform him into a performer whom someone else will pay to place in an arena. That transformation is what makes you a lanista, the owner or manager of a familia gladiatoria, an organized troupe of gladiators. Roman elites may need your fighters, but they do not admire your profession. You trade in bodies, violence, and public death. You can become wealthy. You are unlikely to become respectable. Still, the market is real. Magistrates, aristocrats, and emperors present gladiatorial spectacles to honor the dead, celebrate victories, mark public occasions, and purchase popularity. They need trained fighters, and most do not want to maintain an entire school themselves. You supply the spectacle. At first glance, the business seems brutally simple. Buy captives and slaves cheaply, train them, rent them to a sponsor, and collect a large payment if they die. But that last part is where the economics are usually misunderstood. The crowd may enjoy the possibility of death. You make more money from a capable gladiator who survives long enough to fight again. Your first decision is therefore not whether the recruit looks powerful. It is whether he can become valuable before the cost of maintaining him overtakes what anyone will pay for his services. Prisoners of war are one source. Enslaved men sold through ordinary markets are another. Courts can condemn people to the arena, although a condemned criminal sent to die is not necessarily the same commercial product as a trained professional gladiator. There are also free volunteers, known as octorati, who bind themselves by contract to endure burning, binding, beating, and death by the sword. They are not purchased as slaves, but their contracts still give a manager substantial control over their labor and bodies. For your representative school, however, the man in front of you is enslaved. You inspect his limbs, teeth, scars, balance, and breathing. You are not looking for the largest body. A heavily muscled man who cannot move is less useful than a smaller one who can learn distance and timing. Old injuries matter. So does temperament. A recruit who attacks wildly may impress an inexperienced buyer, but he will be difficult to match and easy for a trained opponent to kill. You pay 600 denarii. That number now sits inside everything that follows. Before you earn it back, the recruit must survive training, remain healthy, appear before paying spectators, and return in a condition that allows you to rent him again. You do not simply hand him a sword. At the ludus, he begins at the wooden post, the palace. He practices the same movements repeatedly, advancing, withdrawing, striking, guarding, and turning without exposing his side. Wooden weapons allow drills without destroying your inventory during training. Specialized instructors, often experienced or retired fighters, teach particular styles. A man being prepared as a murmillo does not train exactly like a Thracian or a retiarius. Each type carries different equipment and occupies a different role in the visual language of the arena. This specialization matters economically because the sponsor is not hiring a warehouse full of interchangeable bodies. He wants recognizable pairings. A shield fighter against a man with a different reach. Speed against protection. Net and trident against helmet and sword. The contrast makes the contest legible to the audience. You are selling controlled uncertainty. That requires more than weapons practice. Your recruit receives regular food, much of it based on barley and legumes. Gladiators were sometimes called barley eaters. The diet is not designed according to modern athletic science, but it supplies large amounts of energy for repeated training and can build a layer of body fat that may protect muscles and blood vessels from shallow cuts. The audience gets blood. You have a better chance of getting the fighter back. You also pay for trainers, guards, equipment, sleeping space, bathing, and treatment of injuries. These costs are easier to carry when spread across a troop. One instructor can drill several recruits. One secure compound can hold dozens of men. Armor can be repaired and reassigned. A physician treating gladiators gains experience with wounds that an ordinary household doctor may rarely see. Medical care does not make the institution humane. It protects an investment. The same hand that bandages a wound may be preparing an enslaved man to suffer another one. Better food and skilled treatment coexist with confinement, coercion, and the threat of punishment. Your recruit is maintained carefully because his body belongs to someone else. That is also why security belongs in the calculation. A gladiatorial school contains armed men who have powerful reasons to escape. In Capua in the late Republic, Spartacus and a group of gladiators broke out of a school and helped ignite a rebellion that threatened Roman armies for years. Most schools do not produce a Spartacus, but locked quarters, guards, discipline, and restricted access are not decorative expenses. For months, your 600 denarius recruit produces no revenue. Then he is judged ready. His first appearance will not be the grand contest imagined by later paintings. He is a novice, one name among many on a program. The sponsor has hired a larger package from your school because a proper spectacle requires matched pairs, reserves, attendance, equipment, and enough fighters to fill the announced program. This is why a successful lanista usually thinks in terms of a troop rather than one heroic champion. One gladiator cannot fight himself. A star needs a credible opponent. If a fighter is injured before the event, the sponsor still expects a contest. Your inventory must include complementary types and replacements. The sponsor, called the editor, is purchasing public attention. He may be a magistrate seeking favor from local voters, an aristocrat honoring a relative, or an emperor displaying power and generosity. Admission can be free to the audience, but the spectacle is not free. Someone pays for the arena, animals, decorations, musicians, officials, and fighters. You negotiate with that person or his agents. For the safe use of your gladiator, you receive a hiring payment. If the man is killed or permanently disabled, the agreement can turn into something much more expensive for the sponsor. Roman law preserves the logic through a famous example discussed by the jurist Gaius in the 2nd century. In his legal problem, gladiators are supplied on terms that pay 20 denarii for each man returned safe and sound, but 1,000 denarii for each man killed or disabled. 20 if he comes back. 1,000 if he does not. The second figure is 50 times the first. This was not an empire-wide price list. Gaius was teaching a legal distinction, not publishing the standard fees of every Roman arena. But his example reveals the commercial mechanism with remarkable clarity. If the gladiator survives, the transaction behaves like a hire. If he is destroyed as a usable fighter, the sponsor owes an amount closer to a purchase price or compensation for the lost asset. Death has been priced into the contract. Now your recruit enters the arena. He does not need to kill his opponent to satisfy the audience. He needs to demonstrate courage, technique, and endurance. If one fighter is defeated, he may signal submission. The crowd responds, but the editor makes the formal decision. The defeated man may be granted missio and allowed to leave. That decision has several prices attached to it. The sponsor has promised danger. If he spares every unimpressive fighter, the audience may consider him stingy or weak. Political generosity in Rome is measured partly by what a sponsor is willing to spend. But if he orders the death of a hired gladiator, he may trigger the much larger contractual payment. The famous hand gesture is therefore not merely a moral decision or a theatrical one. It can be a financial decision made in front of thousands of people. Suppose your novice fights competently, loses, and is spared. He returns with a cut to the arm and bruising under the shield. You collect the safe return payment. You pay for treatment and continue feeding him. You have not recovered your 600 denarii from one appearance. But you still possess a trained gladiator. He now has something he lacked when you bought him, an arena record. On the next program, he is no longer completely unknown. The announcer can identify his previous appearance. The audience can compare him with another fighter. If he wins, he receives a palm. If he survives repeatedly, the marks beside his name become a commercial history. This is where the rental business begins to make sense. The first fee does not need to repay the entire acquisition and training cost. A surviving fighter can be hired again and again. The same body produces a sequence of payments. A letter written by Cicero in the late Republic shows just how attractive this could look from the outside. Cicero congratulated his friend Atticus on acquiring a gladiatorial troupe and said that the fighters had performed splendidly. If Atticus had chosen to hire them out, Cicero suggested, he could have recovered his purchase money in 2 spectacles. That does not give you a universal profit margin. It does tell you that Romans could regard a good troupe as an investment capable of returning its acquisition cost through repeated engagements surprisingly quickly. The crucial words are good troupe. A badly assembled group is expensive to feed and difficult to book. A well-trained familia offers the sponsor an entire program, recognizable fighting styles, credible matches, men who know how to create excitement without turning every exchange into an uncontrolled killing, and enough depth to replace an injured fighter. Your school is not rewarded simply for producing the most violent men. It is rewarded for producing reliable danger. After several appearances, your original recruit wins often enough to become known. Spectators begin remembering his helmet, his movement, and perhaps a stage name. Roman gladiators could become genuine urban celebrities. Their victories were announced and commemorated. Their names appeared in inscriptions and graffiti. At Pompeii, admirers described the Thracian gladiator Salatus as the sigh of the girls. Celebrity changes your negotiation. A novice fills a place in the program. A champion helps sell the program itself. The sponsor can advertise his appearance before the spectacle. People arrive expecting to see a fighter whose reputation already carries a story. Will he win again? Will an old rival finally defeat him? Will the editor spare him if he falls? You can now demand more favorable terms because replacing him with an unknown man changes the value of the event. Your champion also raises the reputation of the school. If your fighters repeatedly perform well, future sponsors know that hiring your familia reduces the chance of a dull or chaotic spectacle. The star supports the price of the whole troop. He also helps you train new recruits. They can observe an experienced fighter, practice under specialists associated with his success, and enter their first engagements under the name of a respected school. Fame becomes an asset that extends beyond the famous man himself. At the extraordinary upper end, Roman rulers could spend immense sums to obtain famous fighters. Suetonius reports that Tiberius persuaded retired gladiators to return to the arena by paying 100,000 sesterces each. That equals 25,000 denarii, dozens of times the plausible purchase price of an ordinary enslaved recruit. This was imperial extravagance, not a normal school fee. The money was offered to exceptional veterans for a special event. But it reveals how far the value of a proven name could rise above the value of an unknown body. Your champion is unlikely to reach that level. He does not need to. He only needs to survive enough engagements for his accumulated hiring income to exceed what you spent acquiring, training, feeding, equipping, guarding, and treating him. Every additional appearance after that point can contribute to profit, although the school's continuing expenses never disappear. This is why the death payment must not be confused with pure profit. Return to the legal example. 20 denarii for safe return looks tiny beside 1,000 for death or disability. If you focus only on today's cash, killing seems 50 times more lucrative. But the 1,000 denarius payment closes the account. You lose all future hiring income from that fighter. You lose his value as a training example. You lose the possibility of selling him. If he is famous, you lose the audience interest attached to his name. You must purchase and train a replacement who may never become equally valuable. For an inexperienced fighter with little future demand, the large death payment might exceed what you expected to earn from him. In that narrow case, the contract can protect you extremely well. For a champion at the beginning of a long career, the same payment may be poor compensation unless the contract assigns him a much higher value. The correct question is not, how much do you receive if he dies? It is, how much future income disappears with him? That calculation changes as the fighter's career develops. At the beginning, most of his value comes from the money already invested in him. Later, more of it comes from reputation and expected future appearances. His body is the same legal property, but commercially he has become a different product. This also changes the editor's decision in the arena. Ordering the death of an obscure novice may be affordable. Ordering the death of a celebrated veteran can be expensive in money, audience reaction, or both. A crowd may demand severity, but it can also admire courage and want a favorite fighter to return. Roman spectators were not a single mind permanently shouting for death. They wanted drama, skill, punishment, bravery, and generosity from the sponsor. A good contest could end with both men alive. The possibility of death gave the spectacle its force. Death in every bout would destroy the supply of experienced performers. You therefore want a fighter to look mortal without becoming immediately disposable. His armor assists in creating that balance. Gladiatorial equipment is designed as much for spectacle as for efficient warfare. Large shields, distinctive helmets, greaves, nets, and arm guards make the fighting styles easy to recognize. Protection is concentrated in some areas while other parts of the body remain exposed. Wounds can be visible without every successful strike being instantly fatal. The equipment also creates matching rules. A heavily protected gladiator may be slower. A lightly equipped fighter depends on reach and movement. Each pairing offers the audience a problem it can understand. For you, that means specialized assets are interdependent. A famous retiarius is more valuable when you can supply an opponent suited to him. If another school controls the best matching fighter, that owner gains bargaining power too. The owner of the star does not control the entire spectacle. The editor can hire from several schools, combine troops, or use fighters under public or imperial control. In Rome itself, emperors established major state-run schools. Imperial ownership could place the most prestigious events beyond the reach of an ordinary private lanista. Private profit is often strongest in the network of Italian towns, where local sponsors still need complete programs and cannot draw endlessly on imperial resources. Campagna is useful because towns are close enough for fighters to travel without crossing half the empire. Transporting men, armor, guards, and supplies over long distances consumes money and time. A nearby school can offer reliability as well as talent. Your relationships with sponsors now matter. A magistrate planning his first spectacle does not want to discover on the appointed day that half the fighters are injured or that the advertised champion has been sent somewhere else. If you provide the promised troop, manage the equipment, and settle disputes without addressing him, he may hire you again. These connections can lead to more contracts and privileged information about coming events. A wealthy patron may also retain gladiators as guards during periods of political disorder. In the violent final decades of the Republic, armed followings could serve purposes far beyond the arena. But access to elites does not erase your stigma. The sponsor gains public honor from the spectacle. You receive money for supplying the bodies. He sits where everyone can see his generosity. You remain associated with the trade that made it possible. That is the political exchange at the heart of the industry. The editor converts wealth into popularity. You convert his need for popularity into revenue. The distinction explains why gladiatorial expenditure eventually attracted regulation. Spectacles had become part of competition for office and status. A candidate who spent heavily could pressure rivals to spend more, while suppliers with desirable fighters could exploit the demand. Imperial authorities attempted at different times to restrict spectacles, control permission to present them, or limit what could be charged. By the later 2nd century, Roman regulation addressed gladiatorial prices directly. That is evidence not of a perfectly organized market, but of a market important enough to become a public problem. The state wanted the games to continue, yet also wanted to restrain the expense, political competition, and private bargaining surrounding them. For your school, a price ceiling is not an abstract law. It limits what you can demand for ordinary fighters and makes celebrity, efficiency, and political access more important. If you cannot freely raise the fee, you need more engagements, lower maintenance costs, or fighters valuable enough to occupy the highest permitted categories. You also have another exit, sale. A trained gladiator can be transferred to another owner, and an entire family can be sold. A buyer may want a ready-made troop rather than spending months acquiring novices and waiting for them to become competent. Your school has already absorbed the training delay and the risk that some recruits will never become useful. That gives the trained fighter a resale premium. His value depends on health, fighting style, age, record, fame, and the remaining length of his usable career. A veteran with many victories may command attention, but he may also be close to retirement. A younger man with fewer appearances may have less fame but more future earning potential. The best resale moment is therefore not automatically at the peak of celebrity. It is when another buyer values the expected future income more highly than you do. You can sell a promising fighter early and take a smaller, safer gain. Or you can keep him, continue collecting hiring payments, and accept the possibility that one bad contest will end his value. The arena places the result in public, but the economic gamble began much earlier. Now return to the man you bought for 600 denarii. If he fails in training, you may resell him as an ordinary slave at a loss, assign him support work, or continue paying to maintain a fighter whom sponsors do not want. If he reaches the arena but performs poorly, he may receive only a few low-value engagements. If he is killed in his first hired appearance, a strong death compensation clause can shift much of the immediate financial loss to the editor. You receive cash, but you have no continuing asset. If he survives, his first payment may appear disappointing. Yet he returns with a public record and can be booked again. If he wins repeatedly, the arithmetic changes. The unknown slave purchased for several hundred denarii becomes a specialized performer. The specialized performer becomes a recognized name. The recognized name raises his own fee, strengthens the school's reputation, and helps you secure complete contracts for the rest of the troop. You may eventually sell him for more than you paid. You may retain him until he has produced several times his acquisition cost. You may receive compensation if an editor destroys him, or he may earn freedom, retire, escape, become disabled, or die before the investment is recovered. There is no single outcome because you are not managing one predictable machine. You are managing a portfolio of coerced human careers. Some recruits never become profitable. Ordinary survivors generate repeat fees. A few stars transform the bargaining power of the school. The larger troop spreads the risk because one death does not end the entire business. The reliable income comes less from one spectacular killing than from repeatedly supplying complete, credible contests. That is the answer to how a Roman gladiator owner made money. He acquired control over people before they possessed specialized arena value. He used food, training, equipment, discipline, and medical treatment to increase that value. He hired the trained fighters to sponsors who wanted public attention. Contracts could transfer the cost of death or disabling injury back to the sponsor. Successful fighters could be rented repeatedly, promoted as celebrities, or sold at a higher value. Relationships with elite clients brought more opportunities, even if they did not make the lanista socially honorable. And when a gladiator returned alive, the owner did not merely save the purchase price. He preserved the next fee. The ugliness of the system lies precisely there. Roman commercial logic could encourage feeding a man well, treating his wounds, and sparing him from unnecessary death, while still denying him control over his own body. Preservation was not freedom. Care was not compassion. Survival was valuable because another performance could be sold. The crowd saw courage, blood, and the possibility of death. The sponsor saw popularity. You saw a reusable asset walking back through the arena gate. The spectacle needed death to feel real. The business needed survivors.